And good afternoon to anybody in Pittsburgh, good evening to anybody in Europe, and good morning tomorrow to anybody in Australia. Lovely to have you back. Merchant of Venice, part 4. And do say hi if you're tuning in. And if you're going to be watching it on YouTube later, you can't say hi, but I'm saying hi to you. So what news do we have? Well, we have... very pleasant day here in Pittsburgh. It's slightly cooler, slightly less humid, if I dare say so. I'm calling it down on myself. And we haven't had a thunderstorm for days. James, how are you out in White Oak? When I say days, actually it was a couple of nights ago. And hello, Marlene. And hello, Mary Lou and Barry. All the regulars are on time as usual. Hello, Grace. Very warm evening in Dublin. Yeah, so I hear. In fact, a few people in Dublin have been sort of Facebooking me and emailing me saying, well, it's warm here as well, as though it was unusual, which apparently this summer it has been. But I'm so delighted you're getting lots of sunshine and chances to go swimming and walking and doing all the lovely things that you can. So all the usual points. I want to say thank you to the Allegheny Foundation, who have generously sponsored this year's worth of webinars, which is wonderful. I want to say thank you to the Theatre Authority, who have allowed us to use our guest artists in the webinar today. I want to thank our guest artists, Gayle Pazerski, James FitzGerald, Martin Giles, and indeed Ken Bolden, who are regular picked actors, and thank you to your contribution. I want to remind you, of course, I did mention it, you can, if you are not watching it now, you are probably watching it on the YouTube channel. You can watch it on the YouTube channel, and we do want you to register yourself, sign up to the YouTube channel, and subscribe. That's the word I'm looking for, because it does make a huge difference. And also, we have our Facebook page and various other social media pages, and you're all very generous when you like what we put up there, but please share as well, because that helps get the word out. And what we really want you to do is keep spreading the word. Hello, Debbie. By the way, if you don't see me responding on the chat, it's because I'm too busy talking, and I can't talk and write at the same time. I'm not that clever. The other thing we want you to do, please consider, is a donation. And right now we have just launched our summer campaign. And for those of you who receive our emails, you'll be reading it in the emails. The summer campaign is a big one. We want to try to achieve $100,000. It's a big target, but it's a very special year for us. It's our 25th anniversary. We've got a lot of special events happening over the winter period. The season starts in September. First production will be November, but there'll be events happening before that. And we want it to be special, so we do need to try to raise that target. As I say, it's a big one. It's $100,000, but every single dollar counts. And I cannot repeat that enough. If you're a regular donor, I would beseech you to consider the idea that whatever you gave us last year, add $25 to it. No matter how small that donation was, add $25 or 25%. But every dollar does count, so please do consider it. How are we doing? It's just 2 o'clock. We'll give the latecomers a moment. Hello, James from Crafton. The new season will be announced. I think we're announcing it end of August or beginning of September, with all the details of all the things that we're going to be doing during the season. Hello, David. Thank you. I'm glad you find it fascinating. And hello, Christine. We're glad you're back at the same time too. We're glad everybody joins us. And for those of you who don't, as I say, who don't join us live, I'm so glad you join us online on our YouTube channel as well. We will try to increase the availability of these in every manner and mechanism that we can find, because, as I say, it's free, it's there for you, and your contribution back to us, either in dollars or in opinions, is always valuable. We love to hear from you. We love to get your emails. I got a very interesting one after last week's, which I will tell you about at the end of today's webinar, but it was rather fun. Excuse me. I'm a little chesty at the moment, and I think it's all the humidity. I think the damp is getting into my aging bones. So be careful out there. Yes, any questions you have, type them into the chat. We'll try to answer them. And if you don't get an answer on the chat, just drop us an email. marketing@bigtheatre.org. There it is. You see, it just comes up like that. If you send us an email, we will do our very, very best to get back to you as quickly as we can. And if we are slightly delayed getting back to you, it's not laziness on our part, but that we're a bit busy. All those usual things, little banners are coming up. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you get lots of, you'll get all the information you need about what we're up to and when we're up to it. And you'll also be amongst the first to know about what the new season's going to be. How are we doing? It's, we give another minute. We always allow 3 minutes for the people parking their cars. Yes, next week we're returning to the mysterious 7 basic plots, and there'll be, I'll tell you more about that at the end. In the meantime, a sip of coffee before I begin. Without coffee, I cannot function. So, how are we doing? Yes, I think we'll begin. There's a few people who normally are there who may not be yet, but that's their fault because we have a lot to get through today. Merchant of Venice, where does justice lie? Now remember my usual admonition, everything I tell you may be wrong. This is purely about interpretation. It's how I look at the particular play, how I examine it, and what I'm trying to do with all of these. Anytime we discuss a particular play, I am saying to you, always listen to what the characters actually say before you make a judgment about it. Because all too often our opinion about a play or a character is based on some vague assumption or some initial impression we had when we first saw the play 30 years ago or whatever. Always listen to what the characters actually say, because it is in the words of the characters and from the words of the characters that the performing artists or the director actually draw, if they're doing their job properly, actually draw the interpretation of the piece. Now, let's begin. I have a lot to get through today. 2 quotes. There are lies, damned lies, and statistics. I don't know who first quoted that, but it was probably an economist. Statistically speaking, the word Shylock would be considered by most to mean a lying, avaricious, and miserly individual who will do anything to make a profit. We have often heard that term. He's a bit of a Shylock. At least I've often heard that phrase. And it is, again, based on an assumption, not an actuality. And that is statistically usually can be accredited to people who haven't actually examined the character in the play. Hello, Helene. And then there's a second quote. The second quote is from the play. And the second quote is, the quality of mercy is not strained. Well, it most certainly is, in both senses of the word, in this play, as we shall see. In the world in which Shakespeare lived, as in our own, which is developed under what we call the Christian ethos, if not under the Christian faith, the principle that justice should be tempered with mercy is a basic tenet of our judicial system. Justice tempered with mercy. And it's actually referred to in the text, if you look for it. But mercy is all too often forgotten in the administration of justice. Very often we have justice that is far from merciful. And certainly that was true in Shakespeare's England under both a Tudor queen and following that a Stuart king under Elizabeth I and James I. Mercy was very often forgotten. Trial by torture on the rack showed very little evidence of justice, and death, by being hung, drawn, and quartered, showed a complete disregard for mercy. And, lest we be complacent, that hasn't changed much here in supposedly Christian America. I might suggest, for instance, that waterboarding and death by very faulty lethal injection are simply the civilized variations of those in Shakespeare's day, but I digress. As I mentioned last week, truth is also on trial in this play. And the only major character in the play who never tells a lie in any way, shape, or form is the alleged villain, Shylock. Shylock always tells the truth, even when it works against him. He tells the truth. So, having been through all the other shenanigans that take place in the play, when we finally arrive at the trial, which is in fact not a trial, it's actually a hearing, an appeal for justice by the plaintiff, Shylock. It is Shylock who brings an appeal before the Duke. Shylock is not arrested, he's not summoned there, he actually goes to the Duke and says, I want justice. Perfectly reasonable. Shakespeare, being a genius, rather than just a writer of courtroom dramas, gives us options to consider in this. It's not cut and dried, it's not simple. He is constantly giving us options to consider. So, we all know the principle that justice is meant to be blind. Justice as a statue is always with a mask on, can't see. Justice is blind. And that all are equal before the law. That's even written into the Constitution of the United States. And that therefore, those who judge, who are put in the authority to make a judgment on an issue, should always be, and in all circumstances, impartial. But are they? And there lies the rub. And this is one of the questions that Shakespeare wants us to examine, I think. Let's look at that very first meeting in the courtroom between Antonio and the supposedly impartial Duke, who is the judge in this matter. Let's have a listen to this.
What, is Antonio here?
Ready, so please your grace.
I am sorry for thee. Thou art come to answer a stony adversary, an inhuman wretch, incapable of pity, void and empty from any dram of mercy.
I have heard your grace hath ta'en great pains to qualify his rigorous course. But since he stands obdurate, and that no lawful means can carry me out of his envy's reach, I do oppose my patience to his fury, and am armed to suffer with a quietness of spirit the very tyranny and rage of his.
Shylock, the world thinks, and I think so too, that thou but leadst this fashion of thy malice to the last hour of act, and then 'tis thought thou'lt show thy mercy and remorse, more strange than is thy strange apparent cruelty. And where thou now exacts the penalty, which is a pound of this poor merchant's flesh, thou wilt not only loose the forfeiture, but, touched with human gentleness and love, forgive a moiety of the principal, glancing an eye of pity on his losses, that have of late so huddled on his back, enough to press a royal merchant down, and pluck commiseration of his state from brassy bosoms and rough hearts of flint, from stubborn Turks and Tartars never trained to offices of tender courtesy. We all expect a gentle answer, Jew.
Just take a look at how this impartial judge actually describes Shylock. A stony adversary, an inhuman wretch, incapable of pity, void and empty from any dram of mercy. Now, I must confess, if I were on trial before that judge, I would be claiming a mistrial at that very moment, because if that isn't prejudicial and incorrect proceeding. But also he goes on, when he talks, "'Tis thought thou show thy mercy and remorse more strange than is thy strange apparent cruelty." The notion that mercy and remorse would be a strange thing in Shylock. He describes the plaintiff as this poor merchant. He finishes with a very important word that we will hear again and again in the trial. We all expect a gentle answer, Jew. And that is the key point of Prejudice. And so what we need to look at as the trial proceeds is if the court can offer to both sides in the dispute, as the judge, the Duke says, offices of tender courtesy, that we can treat both sides equally. And let's see if they do. Shylock gives us a very clean and reasoned argument as to why he pursues the case against Antonio. As I've said before, Shylock doesn't lie, even if lying would be to his benefit. Even if lying would put him in a better light before the court, he doesn't do it. He tells the truth all the time. Now, I'm not suggesting that Shylock is a 100% nice person. I'm simply saying that in that courtroom, he's the one who always tells the truth. He does not prevaricate. He does not lie. He admits quite openly that the reason he's going for this pound of flesh, is pure personal grievance, and he says so. And if we've listened to him throughout the play, every attempt he made to be reasonable has been rebuffed by a merciless Christian reaction. So yes, he's getting his own back, but he did warn them. He did, remember, very early on, offer an interest-free loan out of friendship. It was insult that made him go that step further and say, okay, you won't take it interest-free, let's have a joke. I'll take a pound of flesh, with no intention, we think, perhaps, of ever seeking it. His argument, it is fair to say, is that a merciless set of Christians have brought all this on themselves. So let's take a look at his response.
I have possessed, your grace, of what I purpose, and by our holy Sabbath I have sworn to have the due and forfeit of my bond. If you deny it, let the danger light upon the charter and your city's freedom. You'll ask me why I rather choose to have a weight of carrion flesh than to receive 3,000 ducats. I'll not answer that, but say it is my humor. Is it answered? What if my house be troubled with a rat, and I be pleased to give 10,000 ducats to have it banned? What, are you answered yet? Well, some men there are that love not a gaping pig. Some that are mad if they behold a cat, and others, when the bagpipe sings in the nose, cannot contain their urine. For affection, mistress of passion, sways it to the mood of what it likes or loathes. Now, for your answer. As there is no firm reason to be rendered why he cannot abide a gaping pig, why he a harmless necessary cat, why he a woolen bagpipe, but of force must yield to such inevitable shame as to offend himself being offended. So I can give no reason, nor I will not, more than a lodged hate, and certain loathing I bear Antonio, that I follow thus a losing suit against him. Are you answered?
Interestingly, within that speech, his first argument, the very first thing he proclaims, is something that a Christian would, and it would be accepted on face value as being a worthwhile expression. By our holy Sabbath, I have sworn to have the due and forfeit of my bond. It is a religious pledge. And in a Christian court, that would be accepted in Elizabethan times, and very possibly in today's terms, as being an acceptable and justifiable reason. He also cites that the laws under which Venice operates, the laws and constitution of Venice, which should be fair to all regardless of their faith. If you deny it, he says, let the danger light upon your charter and your city's freedom. In other words, he is simply claiming what any other citizen of Venice has the right to claim, justice. And his reason for doing so is completely irrelevant. He doesn't have to explain why he wants it. And that wonderful description of people who hate pigs and people who hate cats and people who can't stand bagpipes, I'm one of them. Not the Irish one, the Scottish one. You don't have to give a reason. You do not have to justify it, provided your case is valid within law. And he is simply saying, my case is valid within law. Give me justice. So this is part and parcel where I say Shylock doesn't lie. He does not prevaricate. He does not pretend reasons. He does not justify himself. He simply asks for that which is his right. And Antonio, in response to this, shows absolutely no remorse in regard to his past treatment of Shylock. For once, you might say that Antonio is as honest as Shylock is. I maintain, he almost seems to be seeking a kind of martyrdom at the hands of Shylock, as if it were an attempt to show that he is right in his opinion, not simply of Shylock, but of Jews. Listen to the words with an unprejudiced ear.
I pray you, think you question with the Jew? You may as well go stand upon the beach and bid the main flood bait his usual height. You may as well use question with the wolf, why he hath made the ewe bleat for the lamb. You may as well forbid the mountain pines to wag their high tops and to make no noise when they are fretting with the gusts of heaven. You may as well do anything most hard as seek to soften that, than which what's harder? His Jewish heart. Therefore I do beseech you, make no more offers, use no further means, but with brief and plain conveniency, let me have judgment, and the Jew his will.
You notice how that word is becoming more and more prevalent in this. Very often, this is a thing that is done, and if you think about it, it's done very often in almost all societies right down to the present day. There are parts, of the world where simple words that we would take for granted even a few years back, words that would, for instance, describe me, has become a foul and disgusting epithet in the mouths of some people, like the word liberal. The word that we no longer speak out of respect, which we now euphemistically describe as the N-word. Words have power and words have potency, and Shakespeare understood this. And so through the course of this entire sequence of the play, that one word becomes more and more pointed. It becomes more and more descriptive of something that is not Christian, something that is dubious, something that is evil, something that is relentless, something that is cruel. And it's not simply about Shylock. It's not just a description of this particular man in this particular courtroom. These are prejudice words against Shylock's race and religion. And always when we think of Jewishness in this context, we are not just talking religion, we're talking race as well. And the prejudice against Jews in Shakespeare's time was absolute amongst a large portion of the population, just as being a liberal is anathema to such a large population, portion of the population in America, or indeed in Europe. And these words simply imply that anybody who can be described in such a way, anybody with that epithet is bad. And in this play, what Antonio is saying, all Jews are bad. You may as well do anything most hard as seek to soften that which what's harder, his Jewish heart. This is a slur. If Shylock had a defense attorney today, he'd be screaming, I object, strike that from the record, the jury cannot consider that, because it is a racial slur and a personal slur, and it just stinks. But more importantly, it is part and parcel of the greater definition of what I mean by telling lies, using words to falsely create an image or an impression about that person. Now, at this point in the trial, Bassanio, the newly rich, newly married Bassanio, offers to pay off the debt. It's an assumption, and this is another, what I would consider an important point of interpretation. It's an assumption on his part that Shylock's grievances can be bought off. They haven't been listening to Shylock. They think that it's simply profit that Shylock seeks. But Shylock does not seek profit. He seeks justice. They offer him 3 times the amount. They offer twice the amount, then 3 times the amount. And Shylock has already said, right from the beginning, I don't want the money, I want justice. I want it to be recognized that I have been abused, I have been insulted, they have cursed not just me, but my religion, my race. I want justice. I want them to understand what they have done. So when he is offered for his 3,000 ducats, here are 6, Shylock's response is absolute, unequivocal, and clear.
If every ducat in 6,000 ducats were in 6 pots, and every pot a ducat, I would not draw them. I would have my bond. What judgment should I dread, doing no wrong? You have amongst you many a purchased slave, which, like your asses and your dogs and mules, you use in abject and slavish parts, because you bought them. Shall I say to you, let them be free? Marry them to your heirs. Why sweat they under burdens? Let their beds be made as soft as yours, and let their palates be seasoned with such viands. You will answer, the slaves are ours. So I do answer you. The pound of flesh which I demand of him is dearly bought. 'Tis mine, and I will have it. If you deny me, fie upon your law. There is no force in the decrees of Venice. I stand for judgment. Answer, shall I have it?
I love this speech. It's particularly brilliant writing, because within this speech, Shylock, I suppose to an extent, really draws condemnation down on the system, because the system is corrupt and is run by corrupt people who make assumptions. And the assumption that this court makes, the assumption that these people make, that Antonio and Bassanio and even the Duke make, is that Shylock is what I described at the beginning, avaricious, a lying, cheating person who simply wants to do everything to make profit, miserly as well. There is no evidence in this sequence that any of that is true about Shylock. He is simply a man who is deeply wronged in his soul, deeply wronged, deeply hurt, and who has no reason nor cause to explain that other than the justifiable reason, I am the same as you. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not seek revenge? If you are that, so am I, because I'm a man. Not a Jew, not a Christian, not an atheist, a man. And I suffer from and am victim of exactly the same indignities that you could be victim of. And if you were a victim of them, you would be demanding the same. So in this sense, Shylock is absolutely telling the truth. He is being absolutely excruciatingly honest. But he goes further. He says, if every ducat in 6,000 ducats were in 6 parts, and every part a ducat, that's 6 sixes, that's a lot of ducats. What judgment should I dread? I won't have it. I don't draw them. I want my bond. I want my pound of flesh. And what's wrong with that? It's mine. Now, I love the fact that Shakespeare then shifts Shylock into an accusatory mode. You have among you many a purchased slave, which, like your asses and your dogs and mules, you use in abject and in slavish parts. He is saying, you noble, wonderful Christian people still use slavery. And you use your slaves as you would your pack animals. And why do you do that? What's your justification? You bought them. And I say to you, well, let them free. Marry them to your children. Why should they work hard? Why shouldn't they have the same beds as you? Why shouldn't they have the same food as you? Why shouldn't they have all these luxuries that you have? And your answer is, the slaves are ours. We bought them. So, the pound of flesh is mine. I bought it by the same justification that you, yes, indeed, I'm coming to the vengeance point, by you, by your judgment, by your behavior, I am enacting exactly the same principle. If you believe that it is justifiable to own a human being and treat that human being in abject poverty and appalling behavior, I feel justified in seeking that which I have bought and paid for. Your argument is spurious in comparison to mine. The pound of flesh which I demand of him is dearly bought, is mine, and I will have it. Yes, as that last comment just came up, it is vengeance. But he has said, I will have my revenge. He has said, he hasn't pretended, he hasn't prevaricated. This is revenge. It is revenge against all the insults, all the hurt, all the injustice that Christians have laid on him. I'm not saying it's right. I am saying that's what it is. And it is not villainous in comparison to what the Christians are like. And he draws those comparisons. Shylock doesn't own slaves. And when a servant wants to leave Shylock, he says, fine, off you go. Shylock doesn't own slaves. Shylock doesn't tell lies. Shylock doesn't make false excuses. Shylock doesn't try to simper up to anybody. He tells the truth. He may not be nice, but he's honest. So now, he finishes that speech. If you deny me, and he comes back to that initial point he made, fie upon your law. There is no force in the decrees of Venice. I stand for judgment. Answer, shall I have it? Tell me, give me the judgment. Either that pound of flesh is mine, bought and paid for, or you're bending the law to suit yourselves. And I think it might be argued, and I'm not arguing this, but it might be argued that all Shylock is doing is testing the law. He's saying, are you straight? Are you honest? Or will you be prejudiced against me because of that word you keep using? So now we have a dilemma. There is the Duke faced with this very difficult dilemma. To be true to the law or true to his race, true to his religion, true to his friends. But now Shakespeare gives us an additional problem. Into the court arrives a young, clever judge, one well versed in the law. Justice will be done and triumph, we hope, except, of course, that the young man in the court is, in fact, a lie. It's a woman, which, at the time, was completely illegal. It's someone pretending to be a judge, which is illegal. It's someone who is associated by marriage with the defendant, may not be illegal, but certainly is a topic for that person recusing themselves and saying, I can't try this, I'm too closely attached to the defendant. But of course, she doesn't. She, Portia, will make the most eloquent appeal for mercy rather than justice. And remember what we said at the beginning. Justice tempered with mercy. Justice that is fair rather than justice that is absolute. Very important to remember that, because at this particular point, she sounds incredibly plausible. Let's hear what she has to say.
The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptered sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power doth then show likest gods, when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoke thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which if thou follow this strict court of Venice, must needs give sentence against the merchant there.
Notice that first point, in the course of that speech, where she could use his name, she doesn't. She uses the word again. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea. But also, she gives the most wonderful, I mean, this is famous. This speech has become the definition of the description of how mercy should temper justice. You know, it becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. You can have all the power in the world, and you can have all the glory and all the majesty and all the trappings and folderols of being a king. But mercy is above this sceptered sway. It is enthroned in the heart of kings. It is an attribute to God himself. So by drawing down on religious text, which teaches us, be it the Christian Bible, be it the Torah, be it the Quran, doesn't make any difference. Justice with mercy is always referenced. It is inherent to all monotheistic religious principles. Temper justice with mercy. So she goes on. If justice be thy plea, consider that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy. In other words, even in our final judgment, we don't want to be judged on the justice of our cause, because we may have behaved justly very badly. We seek mercy, even the throne of God being referred to in some instances as the mercy seat. Mercy is the major token of appeal. But she does say, but if you want to carry on with this, the pound of flesh is yours. If the strict court of Venice must give sentence against the merchant there. And to be fair, she doesn't say Antonio, she says the merchant there, just as she has described Shylock as the Jew. But Shylock has already nailed his colors to the mast. He has already said, I am not going to listen to any other appeal. I want judgment. We never know whether he intends to carry it out until he's been pushed over the edge, and then he does. But he is demanding judgment. He wants justice. He wants to be told, yes, you are granted your rights under the law. It is revenge. Of course it's revenge. But he's also not shown that what he's basically saying is, I want the same treatment that would be offered to him if the roles were reversed. If the roles were reversed and he owed Antonio money and made such a pledge, he is utterly certain that they would seek out the rigors of the law. He is utterly certain that they would want their just response. So his revenge is not unique. It is the fact that he is a man and he's behaving as a man would under those circumstances, which is already described in the "if you prick us, do we not bleed" principle. We are all the same. So his perception is one that it is fair justice, not unfair justice, and it is balanced. And so Portia must offer a judgment. And so she does. Listen.
"A pound of that same merchant's flesh is thine. The court awards it, and the law doth give it. And you must cut this flesh from off his breast. The law allows it, and the court awards it."
And there it is. Just what Shylock wanted. Justice. His claim is vindicated. The court allows it, the law allows it, and the court awards it. He has got what he asked for. Justice, in plain words, or in a plain word. That is the true and correct judgment, pure and simple. However, and there's always a however, as Oscar Wilde reminds us, the truth is never pure and rarely simple. And the truth of the situation is, within the law, there is always a loophole. If that weren't true, far many more wealthy people would be paying their taxes and not flying into space. However, the law provides loopholes. Sometimes they're in our favor, sometimes they're not. In this case, it's not in favor of Shylock. Otherwise, she wouldn't bring it up. But here it is.
Tarry a little, there is something else. This bond doth give thee here no jot of blood. The words expressly are a pound of flesh. Take then thy bond, take thou thy pound of flesh, but in the cutting it, if thou dost shed one drop of Christian blood, thy lands and goods are by the laws of Venice confiscate unto the state of Venice.
Is that the law?
Thyself shalt see the act, for as thou urgest justice, be assured thou shalt have justice, more than thou desirest.
I take his offer then. Pay the bond thrice, and let the Christian go.
Soft, the Jew shall have justice. Soft, no haste, he shall have nothing but the penalty. Therefore prepare thee to cut off the flesh. Shed thou no blood, nor cut thou less nor more, but just a pound of flesh. If thou takest more or less than just a pound, be it but so much as makes it light or heavy in the substance, or the division of a 20th part of one poor scruple, nay, if the scale do turn but in the estimation of a hair, thou diest, and all thy goods are confiscate.
There are loopholes, and there are loopholes, and by goodness, that's a loophole. And it's such a clever one, and it's such a difficult one, and it's somewhat unpalatable as well, because it is stretching the law to the point where it can almost break. And also, by the way, note that she does use, because we're now heavily into "you are a Jew" land, if you shed one drop of Christian blood, slightly better, I would object to that as well if I were the defense team. And Shylock responds, fine, okay, I'll take the money, let the Christian go. We're really down to name calling at this point. Soft, she says, the Jew shall have all justice. It really is. It's now coming very clear. Shakespeare is using these words over and over again to explain this is not just personal. This is much deeper. And we are in a country where Jews have been forbidden since the reign of Edward I. About as far away from Shakespeare time backwards as we are forwards. And then the whole question, not just of blood, but of weight. 1 pound of flesh, exactly. That's all you were offered, that's all you get. The division of the 20th part of one poor scruple. Nay, if the scale do turn, but in the estimation of a hair, you die. That hasn't been brought up before, but that's the reality of it. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Shylock is faced with an impossible situation. He is not allowed to take the money, which is his right. And if he does make a mistake, he dies. Wonderful, you might say. Very fair, but to consider that very fair is a very extreme interpretation of the law. You know, you might even describe it as a prejudiced interpretation. That kind of interpretation of the law would have our Supreme Court tied up in debate for months. Shylock, seeing the impossibility of the judgment, agrees to withdraw the suit. He says, right, fine, if that's the way you're going to play it, I'm out of here. I've had enough. Forget it all. Forget the money, forget the pound of flesh, I'm going. But the merciful Portia, in her infinite mercy, also wants her pound of flesh. And she seeks far more than a simple pound of flesh in that sense. Just listen.
Tarry, Jew, the law hath yet another hold on you. It is enacted in the laws of Venice, if it be proved against an alien, that by direct or indirect attempts he seek the life of any citizen, the party against which he doth contrive shall seize one half his goods. The other half comes to the privy coffer of the state, and the offender's life lies in the mercy of the Duke only, against all other voice. In which predicament I say thou standest. For it appears by manifest proceeding that indirectly, and directly too, thou hast contrived against the very life of the defendant, and thou hast incurred the danger formerly by me rehearsed. Down, therefore, and beg mercy of the Duke.
You see the way mercy is suddenly turned on its head. Beg for mercy. Not we grant mercy. Not we temper justice with mercy. You have to beg for it. And also, if it be proved, tarry, not tarry Shylock, tarry Jew. If it be proved against an alien that by direct or indirect attempts, that word alien has not changed its meaning or its implication in 400 years. This is prejudicial judgment. I don't care what anybody says. This is a judgment that completely lacks the thing that Portia first initially set out to propose, that Shylock should show mercy, because that is the right way to do things. And yet, does she demonstrate mercy? Like hell she does. There is no mercy in her. She is now a rampaging warrior with a big sword of justice, ready to take the life of anybody in her way, and the person in her, especially an alien and especially a Jew. Basically, she is using the law in its most extreme interpretation to punish Shylock for the fact that he sought justice. Now, I'm not arguing the rights or wrong of Shylock or anybody else. I'm simply saying, listen to what the characters say and demonstrate to me where she may be showing mercy. The price she wants for Shylock's request, desire for vengeance, for revenge, justifiable in his eyes and maybe in the eyes of many of us. The price she wants is his life. But she's not simply seeking his death, because that would be too quick. She wants to destroy his ability to live, because he goes against all their Christian principles. Remember, for Shylock, money is not about wealth. It is the tool of his trade. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. He is essentially a private banker, and a banker without money to use, is ruined. Just look at Wall Street. And Shylock knows that. He knows that once his money is gone, when he has no money to spend, and remember when his daughter took money from him, she took what was basically the tools of his trade. That was his objection, that he wasted something that he uses to create security and life. She was brought up on the profits of his use of the tool money. Shylock knows all this, and look at his response.
Nay, take my life and all. Pardon not that. You take my house when you do take the prop that doth sustain my house. You take my life when you do take the means whereby I live.
And that, I think, has been a cry that's come down the centuries to us. You take my house when you do take the prop that doth sustain my house. You take my life when you do take the means whereby I live. Every person for 400 years before that, take away a person's means of creating a livelihood, you take away their life. When the common land was forced into enclosures by kings and lords and various lords of the manor and dukes and what have you in England, the poor suffered. It created the peasants' revolt. When you take away, Shakespeare is making a huge political statement here, but he's doing it very subtly and very quietly, because this is the sort of thing that can make you end up on the rack. But he is making that point that Shylock's plea here is not just the plea of the Jewish moneylender. This is the plea of everyone for whom justice says your punishment is that we will take away everything you have to make yourself better. When you take away a person's freedom, you take away their dignity. When you take away their house, their goods, their store, their whatever, the tools of their trade, you reduce them to poverty. You make them a non-person. And that's Shakespeare's appeal here. That's what Shakespeare is saying. You take my life when you do take the means whereby I live. It is, to me, one of the great, dare I say, political moments of the play. And finally, we come to the Christian response to the judgment. We've heard an awful lot about the evilness of the Jew. Let's look at the Christian response to the judgment, which I call the final insult. And there's a lot more in the play that goes on about silly things, about losing rings and all of that. Basically, this to me is the climax, the ultimate Christian victory over the Jew. And it is delivered by Antonio.
So please, my lord the Duke and all the court, to quit the fine for 1/2 of his goods. I am content. So he will let me have the other half in use, to render it upon his death to the gentleman that lately stole his daughter. 2 things provided more, that for this favor he presently become a Christian. The other, that he do record a gift here in the court of all he dies possessed unto his son Lorenzo and his daughter.
You shall do this, or else I do recant the pardon that I late pronounced here.
Art thou contented, Jew? What dost thou say?
I am content.
I am content. Oh, no, he isn't. But what else can he do? They have pushed him into a corner, and in order to escape that corner, he has to agree to everything they say, and the most potent and important of those things. Okay, the state gets half his money. Antonio agrees. Antonio gets half his money, but he is willing to give it to the very Christian who stole Shylock's daughter away. She doesn't get it. The husband gets it. Always remember, the husband gets the money, just like with Portia. Bassanio gets the money as well as the girl. And I love this moment. It's a bit like, I don't know if you ever watched Columbo, but one of the things in the Columbo investigations when he was talking to somebody would be to say, oh, that's great, thanks, turn away. And then, one other question. And Shakespeare does that. I think Shakespeare discovered that technique in this moment. 2 things, just 2 little things. He has to become a Christian. and everything else he ever makes in his life still goes to Lorenzo. But it's that he must become a Christian. The single greatest cruelty is to say to Shylock, if you want to survive this, you have to deny your faith, your tribe, your religion, everything, and become one of us. And that is the ultimate cruelty. And I am content. Is Shylock what I would describe as being, and we were talking about torture earlier on, broken on the wheel of justice. A justice which has scant regard for mercy. Or has it? And here's the great, I've been arguing all the way through this that this is an unjust trial, or at least there may be justice, but it is very, very questionable justice. It is the kind of justice that could tie up appeals courts and a Supreme Court in months of wrangling. But it is justice. But what it does not show is mercy. And then, just to add complications to it, I ask another question. Is it in fact mercy? Because there is the argument that in Shakespeare's time, and in fact for generations beyond that, and even, dare I say, up to the present day with some people misguided, Shakespeare is putting that in because as far as the Christian set of values we're concerned, to make a Jew convert to Christianity was offering mercy in that gave them a road to heaven, which of course the church said you could not ascend unless you were a Christian, based on the words of Christ, I am the way, the truth, and the light. Whoever believeth in me, all of that. You can't go to heaven if you're not a Christian. So in one argument, you could be said that they are offering him the mercy of redemption and resurrection. Personally, I don't agree with that, but I'm just putting it forward in case anybody else does and say, well, what about that? There is one argument for the fact that the court is merciful. If you can find other arguments that the court is merciful, please let me know. I'd be fascinated to hear them. Yes, indeed. Ken, you're absolutely right. The thought of Shylock leading a Christian life in Venice would be both hideous and appalling. I want to mention something. I do ask you to send emails if you have questions or opinions or thoughts, and I got an amusing one last week from Judy. I hope you're out there, Judy, because I'm talking about you. Judy did point out the fact, quite interestingly, and it happens in several plays. It happens in As You Like It. It happens in Twelfth Night, in various plays. In Shakespeare time, when Portia takes her stand, as it were, she would have been a man playing a woman playing a man, which of course is true. But my response to that was, through the magic of theatre, we must accept that a man playing a woman playing a man is actually a woman playing a man who is not the man that is playing the woman, but the man that the woman is playing. So I hope that makes everything clear to you. Okay, that's it. Next week, we are going to have another in our, justice can be very unfair. Let's make no doubt about that. If you don't believe justice can be unfair, look at the number of people who were released from prison after 25 years of imprisonment because justice got it wrong. That is why we should always temper justice with mercy, and that is why we should always work on the principle of the doubt. It has to be beyond all reasonable doubt. And Shakespeare, I suppose, in many ways, with this play, was describing that principle, that justice is a difficult thing to achieve, and mercy can temper justice so that if we get it wrong, we get it mercifully wrong and not unmercifully. Anyway, as I was saying, that's it for this week. I want to thank my readers. Thank you so much. Beautifully done. I want to say that next week we're going to have another in our occasional series on the 7 mysterious plots. And next week we're going to be talking about the quest, or as I prefer to call it, I Can Fix This. So do join me next week. Wonderful to have you all here. Do spread the word. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Do look out for those emails that concern donations, because every dollar counts and We're really grateful for all the help you can give us. We've got big plans for our 25th season, not just plays, but lots of other interesting activities and readings and discussions. And I'm going to be introducing our new associate producer in a couple, 2 or 3 weeks' time to talk a little bit more about that as well. But thank you all for being there. And thank you, Grace. Thank you, everybody who's sending in the notes. And I'll see you all next week. In the meantime,